The desert wind howled through the mesquite trees, carrying with it the scent of dust and something far worse, something rotten. Jake Mercer tightened his grip on the rifle as he trudged through the dry brush, his boots kicking up puffs of red dirt. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon, leaving only the cold glow of the moon to guide him. He shouldn't have been out this late. Not after what the old Navajo ranch hands had warned him about. Slowly he turned, his pulse hammering in his throat. A shadow, too tall to be human, lurched between the trees. Then, with a sickening crack, its head turned too far, too fast, and its eyes locked onto him. Its limbs bent at unnatural angles, its spine twisting like a broken puppet's. The thing didn't walk, shambled. The land is cursed, they'd said. Things walk here that shouldn't. But Jake had laughed it off, superstition, nonsense, until tonight. A twig snapped behind him, the voice of something that had learned to mimic speech but didn't quite get it right. Jake froze, his breath turning shallow. The sound hadn't come from an animal, it was too deliberate, too close. And beneath it all, the whispers. Words he couldn't understand, standing in the middle of the road, watching. The engine roared to life, tires spitting gravel as he sped away. He didn't look back. Words that slithered into his ears and coiled around his spine like a venomous snake. At first there was nothing, just the endless stretch of scrubland under the pale moonlight. Then movement. Blood, black in the moonlight, oozed from its chest where the bullet had struck. It didn't care. Jake's finger hovered over the rifle's trigger, his mouth went dry, the thing stopped. They glowed. Yellow. Hungry. A guttural sound escaped its throat, not a growl, not a hiss, but something worse. Jake didn't wait. He fired. The shot echoed through the night. The creature jerked back, but it didn't fall. Instead, it let out a wet, rattling laugh. Jake ran. Behind him, the thing followed. Not quickly. Not yet. But he could hear it, the rustling of dead leaves, the slow, deliberate footsteps. By the time he reached his truck, his hands were shaking so badly he could barely turn the key. But in the rearview mirror, just for a second, he saw it. Waiting. The hunt had only just begun. Jake Mercer didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the thing with the twisted limbs and the glowing yellow eyes. The wound in its chest, black with blood, still dripping as it laughed at him. He sat at the kitchen table, the shotgun across his lap, listening, waiting. He had scrubbed his hands raw, but the stench of gunpowder and something fouler, something decaying, clung to his skin. The ranch house creaked around him, the wind pressing against the windows like a living thing trying to get in. Closer, a chorus of voices that weren't quite human, murmuring in a language that made his teeth ache. They slithered under the door, coiled around the furniture, seeped into his ears like smoke. Then the whispers started. At first they were faint, just the barest hint of words beneath the groan of the old wooden beams. But soon they grew louder. Jake. His breath hitched. That wasn't the wind. That was his name. He stood so fast the chair screeched against the floor. The whispers hissed into silence. Then knock. 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 3 sharp raps against the front door. Harder. More insistent. Jake's fingers tightened around the shotgun. No one came out here at night. No one sane. The knocking came again. He didn't move. A long, ragged breath sounded from the other side of the door, to wet, to guttural. Then a voice, "Let me in, Jake." Jake's stomach lurched. He had heard the stories. Skinwalkers didn't just hunt you. They became you. It was his voice. The thing outside was speaking in his tone, his cadence, but twisted, wrong. Like a recording played backward. The doorknob rattled. Nothing. Jake raised the shotgun, finger on the trigger. His heart pounded so hard he could taste blood in his mouth. He grabbed his keys, his hands slick with sweat, and bolted for the truck. The engine roared to life, headlights cutting through the darkness as he sped down the dirt road. Then silence. A full minute passed. Slowly, he stepped forward, pressing his ear to the door. A face pressed against the glass's face, but stretched, distorted. The skin splitting at the seams as the thing grinned. Its teeth were too long, too sharp, glistening with saliva and something darker. Blood dripped from its gums as it mouthed a single word. He exhaled, shoulders sagging. A hand slammed against the window beside him. Jake whipped around, stumbling back. Soon, then it was gone. Jake didn't wait to see if it would return. But in the rearview mirror, just for a second, he saw it again standing in the middle of the yard, watching him leave. And this time, it wasn't alone. Jake Mercer drove until the gas gauge hovered near empty, his knuckles white around the steering wheel. The desert had given way to dense pine forest, the road narrowing to little more than a dirt track swallowed by shadows. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the peeling paint of a sign, Black Pine Reserve closed until further notice. He hadn't planned to stop, hadn't planned to do anything but keep moving, but exhaustion dragged at him like chains. The trees loomed around him, their branches clawing at the sky. Something rustled in the underbrush, too large to be a rabbit, too quiet to be a bear. He pulled over near an abandoned ranger station, its windows boarded up, its porch sagging under years of neglect. Jake killed the engine. The silence that followed was worse than the whispers. He stepped out, shotgun in hand, the cold mountain air biting at his skin. Then he saw it. Then, with a sound like cracking bone, it took a step forward. Between the pines, barely visible in the moonlight, stood a figure. Tall, thin, its limbs too long, its posture all wrong, like a man stretched on a rack. It didn't move. Didn't breathe, just watched. Jake raised the shotgun. Blood thick and black dripped from its gums, spattering the forest floor. The thing tilted its head, the motion jerky, unnatural. The floorboards creaked under his weight as he backed away, shotgun trained on the door. Behind him, the thing kept pace, its breath hot on his neck, its laughter a wet, choking sound. Instead, it lunged, moving faster than anything human could, its body twisting through the trees like smoke. Jake fired. He turned, bolting for the back door, only to freeze. Jake didn't question it. He dove inside, slamming the door shut behind him. The blast tore through the night. The figure shuddered, but didn't fall. Jake scrambled back, his boots slipping on wet leaves. He fired again. Missed. The thing was closer now, close enough for Jake to see the way its skin peeled back from its teeth in a grotesque smile. Jake turned and ran. Branches whipped at his face, roots snagged at his ankles. He didn't look back. A cabin appeared ahead, its door hanging open like an invitation. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of rot. Silence, then. A hand, pale and skeletal, pressed against the window. Jake didn't wait to see what came next. There, in the corner of the room, slumped against the wall, was a body. Its throat had been torn out, its eyes were gone. Carved into its chest, deep enough to show bone, was a single word: run. The corpse's hollowed-out eyes seemed to follow Jake as he staggered back, his boot heels scraping against warped floorboards. The stench of decay hit him like a punch Kapori blood, spoiled meat, and beneath it all, something rancid, something unnatural. The word run glistened on the dead man's chest, the edges of the letters ragged, as if carved not with a blade, but with claws. Jake's breath came in ragged gasps. He needed to move. Now he turned toward the cabin's back door. Just as something heavy thudded against the front entrance, the wood splintered. Long spindly finger, its nail black and cracked, curled around the doorframe. Jake didn't wait. He kicked open the back door and plunged into the moonlit woods. The forest was alive with sound twigs snapping, leaves rustling, the distant screech of an owl cut abruptly short. But beneath it all, something worse. Laughter. Not from behind him, not from any one direction. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, echoing between the trees, shifting in pitch, sometimes guttural, sometimes eerily close to human. Then a voice. But there it was, soft, warm, wrong floating through the pines. Jake, his mother's voice. Jake froze. It had been 10 years since the car crash, 10 years since he'd heard her speak. "Why are you running, baby?" His throat tightened. He knew it wasn't real, knew it, but his feet slowed anyway. Spine arched like a dog's, but its limbs were too long, its fingers dragging through the dirt. It paused, head twisting backward to stare at him with yellowed eyes. Blood, black and thick as tar, splattered the ferns where it had stood. A branch broke to his left. Jake spun, shotgun raised, just in time to see a shape dart between the trees low to the ground, moving on all fours. Flies buzzed in a thick cloud above the carcass, but no other animals had touched it, not even the scavengers. Above the ruin of its body, a message had been scraped into the dirt. Its mouth split open. "You can't outrun me," it rasped this time in his voice. He dropped to his knees, scooping handfuls of water onto his face, trying to wash away the sweat, the terror, the creeping certainty that he was being herded. Jake fired. The deer trail leading east. The thing screeched, a sound like nails on glass, and vanished into the underbrush. Jake ran. He didn't stop until he reached a shallow creek, its waters sluggish and dark. That's when he saw it. On the opposite bank, half hidden in the reeds, lay a deer, what was left of one. Its ribs had been cracked open, its organs strewn across the mud, like offerings. Almost home. Jake's blood turned to ice, because he recognized this place. The first light of dawn painted the ranch in sickly shades of orange. When Jake Mercer finally staggered through the gate, his clothes were torn, his face streaked with dirt and dried blood, none of it his own. But silence hung thick over the land. A silence that prickled the hairs on Jake's neck. The shotgun trembled in his hands, its barrel still warm from the night's horrors. The ranch should have been waking the lowing of cattle, the cluck of chickens, the distant hum of the generator. Then he saw the blood. Great swaths of it, dark and congealed, smeared across the corral fence. The ground was churned up, as if something heavy had been dragged toward the tree line. He looked down. Severed cow's leg lay in the mud. The bone gnawed clean, the flesh torn in ragged strips. Flies swarmed over it, their buzzing the only sound in the unnatural hush. The barn door creaked open on rusted hinges, revealing only darkness within, then a wet, crunching noise. The sound of teeth on bone. Of the dozen cattle that should have been grazing in the east pasture, only 3 remained, their eyes rolling white with terror, their flanks heaving. One let out a panicked bellow as Jake approached, its hooves kicking up clods of earth. The other animals were gone, not taken, not butchered. Hunted. Jake's boots sank into something wet near the feed trough. A shadow moved in the barn. All that remained was the half-eaten carcass of a calf, drawn in blood, its belly slit open, its insides arranged in a grotesque spiral pattern around its body. Jake raised the shotgun, his finger curling around the trigger. Something was in there, something that wasn't supposed to be. Jake took a step forward. The stench hit him first, rotten meat, and something sharper, like spoiled milk. Then movement. A shape hunched over in the far stall, its back to him, shoulders working rhythmically. The thing turned its head, not all the way. Just enough for one yellow eye to fix on Jake. Its mouth was full of raw meat. Jake fired. The blast tore through the barn, sending splinters flying. The thing screeched a sound that was part coyote, part screaming woman, and launched itself upward, crashing through the loft window in a shower of broken glass and rotting hay. By the time Jake reached the stall, and on the wall above it, "You're next." The ranch house groaned under the weight of the gathering darkness. Jake Mercer sat at the kitchen table, his shotgun disassembled before him, each component cleaned and oiled with trembling hands. The kerosene lamp cast long, wavering shadows that licked at the walls like hungry tongues. Outside, the wind carried the stench of death from the barn, a constant reminder of the horror that had invaded his world, and heavier, deliberate, something large moving across the wooden planks with unnatural patience. He should have slept, should have tried at least. But every time his eyelids grew heavy, the memory of those yellow eyes in the barn loft jolted him awake, his heart hammering against his ribs. Then the footsteps began. Slow at first, just the creak of the porch boards, the subtle shift of weight that could have been the wind. Step, drag, step. Drag. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The sound wasn't just outside anymore. It was on the roof. The droplets weren't rain. They were too thick, too dark. Then silence. Something scraped against the shingles, long, deliberate strokes, like claws testing the surface. Then a shadow passed by the window, too tall, too thin, its movements jerky and wrong. A single drop of liquid hit the window pane. Then another. Jake stood slowly, the chair scraping against the floor. Blood. It trailed down the glass in jagged rivulets, obscuring the moonlit yard beyond. The footsteps moved to the front door. Okay. The knob rattled. His finger hovered over the trigger.
Ow.
The rattling stopped. Jake raised the reassembled shotgun, the barrel trained on the door. The shotgun felt suddenly useless in his hands. Whatever was out there had already taken bullets and laughed. Then, he turned and ran for the back door, crashing through it into the moonlit yard. It didn't stop until he reached the truck, his hands fumbling with the keys, a whisper so close it could have been right beside his ear. "Let me in, Jake." It was his own voice, but warped, stretched thin like a recording played at the wrong speed. The door shook in its frame as something heavy slammed against it. Once, twice. Wood splintered around the deadbolt. Jake backed toward the hallway, his pulse roaring in his ears. A third impact. The door burst inward, revealing the empty porch beyond. Nothing there. Then the ceiling above him creaked. Dust rained down as something heavy shifted in the attic. Jake didn't wait to see what came next. As the engine roared to life, he glanced back at the house. A figure stood in the shattered doorway, silhouetted against the lamplight. It wasn't mimicking him anymore. It was wearing his face. The truck's headlights carved through the desert night as Jake Mercer sped down the empty highway, his knuckles bone white on the steering wheel. The rearview mirror showed only darkness behind him, but he knew better than to believe he was alone. The fluorescent lights buzzed like angry insects, casting a sickly glow over the cracked pavement. Inside, the diner was nearly empty, just a tired waitress wiping counters and a trucker slumped over his coffee at the far end of the counter. The thing wearing his face was still out there, hunting, learning. He pulled into the gravel lot of the Last Chance Gas and Diner, the only outpost of civilization for 30 miles. Jake's boots crunched on broken glass as he entered. The waitress looked up, her smile dying when she saw his wild eyes. The blood streaked across his shirt. "You okay, hun?" she asked, already backing away. Before Jake could answer, the lights flickered. The trucker at the counter lifted his head, his bloodshot eyes focusing on Jake with sudden intensity. A shadow passed outside the window to tall, its movements all wrong. Then the power went out. Darkness swallowed the diner whole. Jake's breath came in short, panicked bursts. The emergency lights sputtered to life, casting everything in dim red. The waitress was gone. The trucker's stool sat empty, his coffee cup overturned, black liquid spreading across the counter like blood. From the kitchen came a wet, tearing sound. Jake reached for his shotgun left in the truck. Stupid. So stupid. The sound stopped. Silence. Then Jake. The voice came from right behind him. His own voice, but wrong. The syllables stretched too long, the tone dripping with mockery. Jake spun. Stainless steel counters were slick with blood. The remains of the trucker strewn across the cutting boards, his ribs pried open, his heart missing. The diner was empty. A drop of something warm hit his cheek. He wiped it away. His fingers came away red. He looked up. Blood dripped from her dangling fingertips, pooling on the linoleum below. On the third impact, it gave way, sending him stumbling into the night. Scrawled in crimson on the wall behind her were 2 words. As he peeled out of the lot, one final glance in the rearview mirror showed a figure standing in the diner's doorway, its face a perfect replica of Jake. So unsmiling as it lifted the waitress' severed head to its lips and took a bite the waitress hung from the ceiling fan. Her throat slit ear to ear, her dead eyes bulging. "Found you." The front door burst open. Wind howled through the diner, carrying with it the stench of rotting meat and wet fur. Jake ran for the back exit, crashing through the kitchen doors. The back door was locked. From the dining area came the sound of something heavy, dragging itself across the floor. Closer, closer. Jake threw his shoulder against the door. Once, twice. He didn't stop running until he reached his truck. The desert highway stretched endlessly before Jake Mercer, a black ribbon under the pale moonlight. His truck's engine growled as he pushed it beyond safe limits, the speedometer needle trembling near 90. The diner's horrors still clung to him, the waitress's dangling corpse, the thing wearing his face. The way its teeth had sunk into dead flesh with wet, crunching delight. He needed to get to town. Needed people. Witnesses. Safety in numbers. The first sign something was wrong came when his headlights illuminated the roadside marker, a white cross adorned with sun-bleached flowers. Jake had passed it 100 times before. Tonight, fresh blood streaked the wood. Then he saw the cars. No passengers. No signs of struggle. It's just dark stains on the seats and drag marks leading into the scrubland. The stench hit him before he even opened the door, metallic and thick, the unmistakable smell of violent death. His boots sank into something wet as he stepped out. The entire road was slick with it, glistening black in the moonlight. 3 vehicles parked haphazardly along the shoulder, doors hanging open like broken jaws. Jake slowed, his tires crunching over broken glass. Blood, gallons of it. A low moan came from the ditch. Jake approached cautiously, his hand on the hunting knife at his belt. The figure in the gully was barely recognizable as human, a young woman, her face shredded, one arm missing at the elbow. She gurgled, blood bubbling between her lips. "You did this." Her remaining hand clutched at the dirt, dragging herself forward in agonizing inches. She looked up as Jake approached, her one remaining eye widening in terror. Too wide, too many teeth. "You." Rivers of it dripping from its chin, staining its shirt, running in dark streams down its arms. Jake recoiled, frozen in horror. The thing raised a hand and waved a grotesque parody of friendliness. Then it turned and vanished into the night, leaving behind only the sound of something large moving through the brush. Then he saw them. Footprints, leading from the carnage back toward his truck. His own boot prints. What? But he hadn't been here until now. The woman gasped, her body convulsing. With her last strength, she pointed past Jake, her finger trembling. He turned. 20 yards away, at the edge of his headlight's reach, stood a figure, his exact height, his build, wearing his clothes. Its face was a perfect mirror of Jake's own, except for the smile and the blood, as Jake watched, in the dying woman's final, accusing whisper. Monster. The desert wind carried the scent of burning sage and rotting meat as Jake Mercer stumbled through the abandoned Navajo settlement. The ancient hogans stood like broken teeth against the blood-red dawn, their wooden frames bleached white by decades of sun. He hadn't planned to come here, hadn't planned anything after the massacre on the highway. But his truck had died 3 miles back, its engine choked with a thick black substance that smelled like spoiled milk and copper. The ground crunched underfoot, not gravel. Bones, small ones, rabbits, coyotes, arranged in strange patterns between the crumbling dwellings. Some formed spirals, others jagged arrows pointing toward the largest hogan at the settlement's heart. Jake's breath came in ragged gasps. The dirt floor had been dug up in places, revealing skeletal hands clawing upward as if trying to escape. And at the center, kneeling before a crude altar of stacked skulls, was a figure. His reflection in the diner's window had shown dark veins creeping up his neck, branching like tree roots under his skin. The air grew heavier, pressing against his skin like invisible hands. His shirt, the one he'd lost days ago. Its mouth opened a black maw filled with needle teeth and spoke in a voice like grinding stones. The thing wearing his face wasn't just mimicking him anymore, it was changing him, poisoning him. A low moan echoed through the ruins. Not human, not animal. The sound vibrated in Jake's teeth, in the hollows of his bones. The largest hogan's door hung open, its interior black as a fresh grave. From within came the wet sound of something tearing meat from bone. The altar before it dripped with fresh blood, pooling around the latest offering, a human heart, still twitching. Jake's knife felt pitiful in his hand, but he stepped forward anyway. The stench rolled over him in waves, decaying flesh, burnt hair, and beneath it all, the ozone temps of lightning about to strike. The hogan's interior defied reason. The walls pulsed like living tissue, streaked with veins of glowing yellow ichor. Not the thing wearing his face. Something older. Its back was to Jake, its spine visible through patches of rotting skin. The ribs moved like bellows with each rattling breath.
Oh, yes.
Jake's own heart stuttered as he recognized the flannel shirt wrapped around the base of the altar. The creature's head turned slowly, its neck cracking with the movement. One milky eye rolled toward Jake. "You brought the feast. I'll join it." Outside, the wind began to scream. The sheriff's office reeked of stale coffee and gun oil. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow on the wanted posters lining the walls, one of which now bore Jake Mercer's face. "Don't know how you thought you'd get away with it," he muttered. "Security cameras at the gas station caught you clear as day." His own reflection in the two-way mirror showed a wild-eyed stranger with cracked lips and sunken cheeks, the dark veins beneath his skin spreading like ink in water. Deputy Wilkins tightened the cuffs around Jake's wrists, the metal biting into flesh still crusted with desert dirt. Jake's throat burned. The footage they'd shown him wasn't him. It moved wrong, smiled wrong, but the resemblance was perfect. His face, his clothes, his hands dripping red as he'd butchered the clerk. Across the room, Sheriff Harlow studied the evidence board crime scene photos from the highway massacre. The diner slaughter all pinned beneath Jake's name. The broken-nosed lawman shook his head. 12 dead, Mercer. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. That thing out there, it's not human, and it's not him. Her eyes locked onto Jake's, desperate. "They found another body last night. You were in custody. You've got the wrong man." Even for a Skinwalker hunter, this is some sick shit. Only his pistol remained, spinning on the tile floor beside a trail of wet red footprints leading out the broken window, they're saying. It was still eating when the deputies arrived. Commotion erupted in the hallway. The door burst open, revealing Maria Vasquez from the res, her braids flying as she fought past a deputy. Harlow sighed. Maria, not now. She slammed a bone charm on the desk, the ancient talisman smeared with something dark and glistening. The sheriff paled. "Where, old McIntyre Ranch?" Maria's voice dropped to a whisper. Jake's stomach turned. The McIntyre place was 20 miles from town. Impossible distance for a man in handcuffs. Harlow rubbed his temples. Christ almighty. Outside, the wind howled like a wounded animal. Then the power went out. In the sudden darkness, the radio crackled to life, just static at first. Then a voice. Jake's voice, but warped, guttural, hungry, glass shattered. Someone screamed. When the emergency lights flickered on, Deputy Wilkins was gone. And carved into the wall above the sheriff's desk, fresh enough that fibers still curled away from the marks, "Game over." The moon hung like a rotten fruit in the sky as Jake Mercer stumbled through the dead cornfields behind the sheriff's station. His wrists still burned from the handcuffs, the flesh rubbed raw during his escape. The cold night air carried the distant wail of sirens. They would be hunting him now in earnest. Convinced he'd slaughtered Deputy Wilkins. Maria's fingers dug into his arm as she pulled him behind a rusted tractor. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her eyes wide with more than just fear. The bone charm around her neck pulsed with a faint sickly glow, casting greenish light across the fresh bloodstains on Jake's shirt, none of it his own. The mark had spread since the cursed land of black, branching pattern crawling up his neck like lightning frozen under his skin. It pulsed in time with his heartbeat, the veins around it swollen and dark. "Show me," she demanded, her voice trembling. Jake hesitated, then peeled back his collar. Maria recoiled. "God, it's claiming you." His bones ached as if something inside him was trying to rearrange itself. When he looked at his hands, the fingernails had turned black, the cuticles weeping something thick and yellow. A guttural scream tore through the night, far too close. The thing wearing Jake's face was hunting again. Jake's vision blurred at the edges. Maria pressed a hunting knife into his palm. "We have to get to the sacred grounds before the change finishes. There's still time, too," a cornstalk snapped. They turned in unison as the rows of dead plants parted, revealing a nightmare made flesh. His vision went red, then black, then something else entirely, a kaleidoscope of horrors as his mind brushed against the thing's thoughts. It still wore Jake's face, but the skin had begun to split along the jawline, peeling back to reveal glistening muscle beneath, its fingers elongated into claws, the nails curling like talons, and its eyes, no longer human, no longer pretending. Something wrong? Pure black from edge to edge, reflecting the moonlight like a predator's in the dark. The bone charm flared brighter, its light making the creature hesitate. Maria's chant started low, the ancient words rolling off her tongue as she stepped between Jake and the abomination. Then it smiled and spoke with Jake's voice. "Too late." Jake's knees buckled as white-hot pain lanced through his skull. Images flashed, the sheriff's throat torn open. Maria's bones cracked like kindling, and himself not as a man but as something else. The last thing he heard before darkness took him was Maria's scream, cut abruptly short, and the wet sound of something feeding. Jake Mercer awoke in a grave of his own making. The stench of wet earth and rotting flesh filled his nostrils as he clawed his way to the surface, his fingers splitting open against roots and stones. Moonlight filtered through the trees, painting the forest in silver and shadow. His body burned with fever, every muscle writhing beneath skin that no longer felt like his own. Blood crusted his lips, not his. Maria's necklace lay tangled in his fingers, the bone charm shattered, its power drained. Memory surfaced in jagged fragments. Her scream, the wet crunch of breaking bones, the taste of something copper-rich and warm. The forest tilted, his vision swimming with strange new clarity. Every leaf stood sharp against the darkness. Every scent carried layers of meaning. Blood, fear, death. Jake retched, his stomach heaving, but nothing came up. His tongue probed unfamiliar sharpness, his teeth had lengthened, the canines now curved like a predator's. The mark had spread, the black veins branching across his chest, pulsing with each ragged breath. A howl shattered the night. Not from a wolf, not from any natural beast. The sound twisted through the trees, vibrating in Jake's bones, calling to something deep inside him. He stood on unsteady legs, his joints popping as they realigned, and him, the other. The thing that had worn his face now stood at the edge of the clearing, its form shifting like smoke in the wind. The mark on his chest burned, spreading its poison through his veins. No longer pretending to be human, its true nature revealed itself in glimpses, a muzzle forming and dissolving. Claws extending and retracting, eyes that burned yellow, then black, then red. It tilted its head, studying him with something like pride. "Almost time," it whispered, though its mouth didn't move. The words slithered directly into Jake's mind. Maria's arm lay severed in the dirt, the fingers still curled around her knife. Jake stumbled back, his heel catching on something soft. The creature laughed, a sound like bones rattling in a tin can. Then it lunged. The knife was in his hand now, its blade glinting in the moonlight. Jake moved without thinking, faster than he ever had before, rolling. Aside, his claws tore through the space where his throat had been. The creature circled, its form blurring at the edges. Jake's body thrummed with something new, something terrible. He could feel it, the change, the becoming. The hunt was no longer between hunter and prey. It was between two monsters. Only one would walk away. The cave exhaled the scent of dried herbs and old blood, as Jake Mercer crawled through its jagged mouth. His body screamed with every movement, muscles knotting, bones grinding against each other in ways human anatomy was never meant to endure. In the center sat the old shaman, his face a map of wrinkles, his eyes milky with blindness that saw too much. The black veins now covered half his face, pulsing like living things beneath his skin. His voice came out wrong, too deep, too guttural. "Help me." Deep in the cavern's belly, firelight flickered against ancient pictographs, twisted figures with too many limbs, their mouths open in silent screams. "You reek of it," the shaman rasped, stirring a clay pot filled with dark, viscous liquid, like rotting meat and lightning. Jake collapsed before the fire, his fingers clawing at the dirt as another wave of pain racked his body. The shaman watched, unblinking, as Jake's spine arched, vertebrae popping like firecrackers. The shaman's lips peeled back from yellowed teeth. No one helps the damned. His blind eyes rolled back, showing only whites as he hissed. "Now the poison's in your marrow." He lifted the pot, the liquid inside swirling on its own. "Only two paths remain. Die as a man, or live as the thing you hate." A spasm bent Jake double as something moved beneath his ribs. "You fought the change too long," the old man muttered. Outside, the wind carried the sound of something large moving through the brush. The creature had followed him here. The shaman's hand shot out, gripping Jake's wrist with surprising strength. "Listen well, half-thing. It wants you to complete the change, to become its twin. The land hungers for new blood." He pressed a obsidian blade into Jake's palm. "When the moon dies tonight, one of you must feed the earth. The other will walk as a god of rot." The fire snuffed out. In the sudden darkness, The cave walls breathed. The shaman's voice became a whisper. "It's here." Jake turned just as the entrance filled with a familiar silhouette, his own face stretched across something monstrous, its jaw unhinging like a snake's. The shaman began to chant. The creature screamed, and Jake's world dissolved into blood and teeth and the terrible understanding of what he must become to survive. The moon bled crimson as Jake Mercer staggered into the cursed clearing, his body no longer entirely his own. Bones cracked and rechnit beneath flesh that rippled like living shadow. It stood revealed in its true form, a grotesque tapestry of stolen parts. Its elongated limbs ending in curved talons, its patchwork skin stitched together from victims both human and animal. Where its face should have been gaped a void filled with squirming needle-like teeth. They dissolved as the mark on his chest pulsed, flooding his veins with liquid fire. His jaw unhinged with a wet pop. The obsidian blade burned in his grip, its edge humming with the shaman's dying breath. Across the blood-stained earth, the creature waited, no longer mimicking, no longer pretending. The obsidian blade found purchase in rotted flesh, releasing a stench like opened graves. Jake's teeth closed around something that might have been a throat, his vision swimming red as bitter blood flooded his mouth. The land itself held its breath. Jake's last human memory surfaced Maria's scream, Sheriff's betrayed eyes, the first innocent he'd failed to save. As the first rays of sunlight touched it, the heart crumbled to ash between his fingers. The creature charged. Time fractured, claws met talons in a spray of black ichor. The creature's form shifted wildly, elk skull, bear claws, Jake's own stolen face, each transformation slower than the last as the blade's poison took effect. The earth trembled beneath them, hungry. They rolled through the dirt, a tangle of snapping bones and rending flesh. Dawn's first light crept over the horizon when the killing blow landed. Jake's talons tore upward through the creature's ribcage, emerging with its still beating heart a rotten, writhing thing that pulsed with stolen lives. The creature's shriek shook the trees as its body collapsed inward, flesh sloughing off bones that dissolved into the thirsty earth. He looked down to see the black veins receding, his claws retracting. The mark faded, leaving only scar tissue behind. Silence. Then a new pain lanced through Jake's chest. The land had chosen. Somewhere in the trees, a twig snapped. Jake turned, his human eyes meeting those of the first terrified witness, a hiker clutching a camera. His face a mask of horror at what stood before him, and what had survived. The desert sun burned overhead as Jake Mercer stood before the ruins of his old life. The ranch house sagged under the weight of abandonment, its windows shattered like the eyes of a skull. The scar where the mark had been itched constantly, a phantom pain whispering of the thing he'd killed, and the thing he'd almost become. 3 months had passed since the final confrontation. 3 months of police interrogations, hospital tests, and the slow, creeping realization that some transformations cannot be undone. His teeth ached with remembered hunger. The doctors called it PTSD. Harlow stepped out, his hand never far from his sidearm. The once portly lawman had grown gaunt, his eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. They defound Deputy Wilkins' remains last week. Core what was left of them scattered across the cursed land in careful patterns. The Navajo elders who sometimes watched him from afar knew better. His reflection in the broken mirror showed a face too pale, eyes too sharp. Blood still called to him. He could smell it from a mile away, the metallic temps of a wounded jackrabbit, the iron-rich scent of a ranch hand's skinned knuckles. Harlow asked, tossing a newspaper onto the hood of Jake's truck. The headline screamed, "Copycat Killer Strikes Again." Beneath it, crime scene photos showed bodies arranged in familiar spirals, their chests carved with symbols Jake recognized from his nightmares. The horses in the neighboring corral screamed, their hooves pounding against the fence. The sheriff's cruiser rolled up the driveway, kicking up dust. "You seen the news? You sure you got all of it that night?" Jake's fingers twitched. Scar on his chest burned. Harlow lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "Forensics say the blood ain't all human." His eyes flicked to Jake's 2 white teeth. A gust of wind carried the scent of something dead from the canyon. Jake didn't answer. He was too busy listening to the new voice whispering from the shadows of the barn, a voice that sounded suspiciously like his own. The hunt was over. The hunger remained. And deep in the desert, something laughed.